Have you ever realized that the time has come for a change in your life, but you feel stuck because life can be messy? Often we don't have the time or feel like we have the time or know where to start to find that fresh path. One of the best ways to end the cycle is to determine what happiness means to you. In this episode, you'll learn it's never too late to discover what lights you up, what holds you back, and how to set yourself free. Welcome to Meet the Author Live. I'm your host, John Saunders, founder of Forward Advisory Solutions, a coaching and consultancy firm and author of The Optimizer, building and leading a team of serial innovators. My firm was built on a foundation of over 20 years as an executive distribution leader on Wall Street and a relentless focus on collaborative innovation and problem solving. The show offers you thought leadership wisdom through live conversations with the ability to answer your questions live in the chat. To start, please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. And if you know Shannon, please drop her a note to say hello. It's always good to get a sense of where people are joining us from, and make sure you know how to use the chat function, because we will answer your questions at the midway point after we get through questions with Shannon. So today's episode, we'll meet new author Shannon Talbot, who published her book, Breaking Free, Stop Holding Back, Start Being You, Your Guide to Creating the Career and Life of Your Dreams. She published her book Monday of this week. Congratulations. Her book offers a roadmap to stopping with excuses and saying a big heck yes to living the life of your dreams. A little bit about Shannon. Shannon is a certified health and life transformational coach, a former corporate leader in advertising and financial services. Shannon started her own coaching and speaking company to help working professionals live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. Shannon has an MBA from the Schulich School of Business and has been featured on CBC Radio, Canadian Broadcasting, and in today's parent, Shalatine, Lifehack, and Thrive Global. Shannon lives in Toronto with her husband and two young sons and loves singing karaoke. Finally, we have something in common. Shannon, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you on and getting to know you and your story. How does it feel now? Book came out Monday. How does it feel to have a book out there and be a fully published author?
Feels really surreal. It was a dream I have had since I was 10 years old. And it's just feels great to be able to say that it's out there and I did it.
I mean, unbelievable. And we've got some people jumping in the chat here. Several. John Thompson, hello, welcome. Nafis Khans, Georgetown friend, Jordana Fry from Toronto. Jordana. Jessica Moffat, hi. Jessica, thanks for jumping on. And Jen Garrett, appreciate you guys joining. Shannon, your book is fascinating, and you've had this, I'm going to call it non-linear career, which I think many of us have, but we have this kind of assumption that, my career should be this straight path line, right? Which of course isn't reality. As you look across your early career, how did you think about success? Because so much of this story about sort of like we tie success and happiness together. What did success look like for you early on?
Well, for those of you who tuned in, I'm curious to know, have any of you ever played the game of life? Board game. I feel like it's from the 90s. That's when I was growing up. It was in the 90s. And as silly as it sounds, that is how I define success. So game of life, you go to, you have a car, you go to school, you get a degree, you get a job, you get a salary that's associated with that job, you get married, you have kids, yada, yada, yada. And I don't know why, but that for me was how I defined success for a very long time. And it was, okay, go to school. And at the time I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to make $50,000 a year. It was the 90s. And I was going to have 4 kids because that's how many spots there were in the car for the number of kids. And it was just really, okay, I'm going to do this and check, check, check. And in high school, I had 2 secret silly dreams. One was to be a speaker. One was to be an author. But those weren't in the game of life. Those, those weren't real careers. So for me, it was like, nope, I got to go to, I went to business school, got my business degree, went into banking right after university, got a really great job. I was one of the few Spanish speakers on the team. So I got really great opportunities. I moved up the corporate ladder. I went and got my MBA. I got married. I had 2 kids and I bought the house. I have the dog. And it was like, check, 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 check. I was winning at the game of life, and I was winning at what I had told myself was the definition of success.
Unbelievable, right? And so you let a board game sort of define that for you, which is fascinating. And, one of the things you talk about in the book that I found really interesting was, sometimes people label us, and sometimes we can label things ourselves. And is that a little bit of the story here?
Yes, exactly. And a lot of it, I did it to myself, right? It wasn't It wasn't anyone telling me, oh, Shannon, you have to be this or you have to do that or that's silly. It was, no, I put the own labels on myself and put my own, oh, this is success has to be this. And yeah, I totally did it to myself. My parents never told me what to be or anything. It was all self-inflicted.
It's fascinating when you share that. When I think about why I chose my major in college, I was sort of like, what do I do? I don't know. I want to do something sort of business related. My brother was an econ major. I was like, all right, I'll do that. And, simply because he did. And I sort of couldn't think of my own path at the time, which is fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. And looks like we got a lot of Life fans out there. Shannon Anand looks like he's maybe played it before. Hector from Mexico, thanks for joining, Hector. Stephen Force looks like he's might be playing it today for the snowy weekend if you're in the snow part of the snow part of the country. John Thompson, Life Cereal too, right? Mikey likes it, I think was the tagline there. And we've got a shout out to Shoots and Ladder here. Thank you very much.
Oh, I just played that this morning with my boys. We have a PA day here in Toronto, so boys are home.
Have a what day?
Oh, a PA day, professional. I should know what the A stands for. Like a day off. The boys are home from school today.
Gotcha. We have one of those coming up, and we've got about 5 inches of snow in the DC area and falling. Amazing. Feels like I'm in Canada. So Shannon, you're a busy person. You've had this epic run. You've built this successful business. What the heck drove you to write this book and pull it all together and take the time to struggle through it? Because it's no easy task, right?
No. Well, I have to say it goes back to probably 2008 was a really big and pivotal year for me. It was the year I got married. It was the year I took a leave of absence from my work. They graciously gave me a 9-month leave of absence so I could go do my MBA. And really, here I was checking those boxes. I was, life was looking perfect on the outside. But the truth was that was the year everything kind of started to change. That was the year I became a wife. And for the first 9 months of my marriage, I was relying on my husband's income, which was very odd. And I almost reverted back to the 1950s and put new constraints and expectations on myself of how a wife should act, which is not, typically how I acted. Later on, I became a people manager for the first time. And then a few years later, a mom. And with each new title or salary increase, I felt this immense pressure. I didn't know how to manage it. I told myself I had to act a certain way. And my stress and my irritability grew. And how did I cope? I like to say I pressed the easy button. I don't know if you have that commercial in the States, but in Staples commercial where you press the easy button.
Yeah.
And what I did, I switched jobs or I'd switch companies and things would be great for a little while. And then I'd kind of be back to where I was. And I realized I still wasn't happy. And actually 3 years ago this month, so January 2021, I was pushing my 5-year-old on the swing. It was probably as freezing outside then it is today, but it was COVID and we had to get outside. And I was pushing him on the swing and he said, "Mommy, can I give you a goal for this year?" And I got really excited. I was doing my coaching certifications on the side. I said, "Yeah, bud, give me a goal. What's my goal?" And he said, "Mommy, can you be less angry this year? Because you are angry all the time." And it was not the goal I was expecting, but it was the goal I needed to hear. And I needed that moment to realize that, happiness wasn't switching jobs or making more money or getting that next senior title. It was living the life I wanted, not the life someone else expected of me. And it was in that moment that I gave myself permission to chase my happy. And a few months later, I gave notice at my job. And I took a risk. I started my own company where I do coaching and speaking and then later writing my book. And I changed my definition of success from title and salary to have more passion and purpose and work-life balance. And I've now, helped thousands of professionals to live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives.
I still have the hair on my arm standing up from picturing that moment of you with your son in the swing and, waiting for this sort of elated moment of, "Mom, go do this," or "I hope you, win this or get the new, whatever." And he said, "Stop being so angry." Like, do you remember how you felt in that moment?
Oh, it was like a dagger to my heart. I expected him to be I don't know. He's very athletic. I expected it to be like, I want you to do 100 push-ups this year. Or, I thought it was going to be a fun goal. Was not expecting those words to come out of his mouth at all.
After I spent, was 25 years on Wall Street and left to similar path, coaching and consulting operation and writing a book. And I'll never forget early on in the book journey, I was home one day and it was COVID. And so everyone was home and I went to have lunch with my son, my older son. He was probably 10 at the time. And I remember asking him, I said, does it feel like things are different now with sort of this career change for me? And he looks at me and I said, does it feel like I'm around more? And he looks at me and he said, you were never here. And I'll never forget that moment. And I I literally went on my Marriott app on my phone and it said, Titanium Elite Lifetime Member.
Wow.
Almost 1,300 nights I spent in Marriott's life to date, which is like 3+ years, right? And boy, I feel like it was a similar moment to your son's thought around there. Really hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow.
I want to just share with people, if you want to connect with Shannon and learn more about her story, just to keep it so you're aware, Shannon-Talbot MBA on LinkedIn and her website, shannontalbot.com, if you want to learn more about her story. Let's keep rolling. So Breaking Free, this incredible book that I've certainly enjoyed reading. And one of the things I really like about it is how you really speak to us sort of in between the chapters, kind of like pull back the veil and kind of say like, right, people, is this what's happening? I love the way you connect in your writing style. I really appreciate that. But so Breaking Free, Shannon, what does that mean?
Well, there's something about when my kids are 5 that they're really sage and wise and something happens with them. So for me, my oldest, who's 10 now, so 5 years ago, he spent 31 days in hospital. And I like to say it was for his appendix gone rogue. It was what should have been really simple, but turned into a bit of a nightmare. And my husband and I took turns spending every night in the hospital with him over these 31 days. And at the time at work, I had a lot going on. My boss had moved on. So I was acting in his position while interviewing for his position, while doing my current day job and doing all of that. And performance reviews. And it was just a very busy time. It was holiday season, very busy time at work. And then my son got admitted to hospital. And of course, that became number one priority. And it was the first time in a long time where my work really took a back seat. And it was a great time too, because at the time, my oldest actually had undiagnosed autism and ADHD. And him and I had really been struggling at home. We'd been really going at it, fighting a lot and not seeing eye to eye. And so this was a really great bonding moment for him and I too, to be alone in the hospital. And he's just so incredible. Anyway, so during this time in the hospital was also a time for me to step back. And when he was sleeping at night, I found myself sitting there and thinking about life and, all those things. And I asked myself 3 questions. And I asked myself, am I happy? Am I healthy? Do I feel fulfilled? And my answers were, no, not really. And then my immediate next thought was, Shannon, come on. Like, how can you not? You're winning at the game of life. You've checked all your boxes. And I felt immense guilt for wanting more. And it's like, why am I not just happy with this great life? But for once I allowed myself to explore it. I said, okay, no, you know what? You're not happy. Something's missing. It's time to go after it. And being the person I was, I started with my career. I actually hired a coach for the first time. I set a goal, a 10-year goal to start my own company to help others live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. But then I moved, I switched industries. I moved into advertising, which was super fun and creative and different. I gave myself permission to show up there really authentically and as a leader and back up my confidence, because I ended up not getting the promotion at work, which is a big hit to my ego, but also the necessary push I needed. And I still wasn't great at managing my stress, hence what happened a few years later. But I was started on the path to starting those healthier habits and just to feeling more fulfilled and going after more of what I wanted and being true to myself.
31 nights your son spent in the hospital.
31 nights.
That is hard to imagine. I mean, I've had to spend a few 5-hour stints with my son because allergies in the hospital, and I find that heartbreaking and just painful. But that's we're out that same day, 5 hours, 31 nights. I couldn't even imagine.
And he didn't complain once.
Wow,
he was a superstar.
built for resilience and
yes.
already breaking free. Was this the same son who gave you the goal?
No, 2 different but funny, both
Yeah.
at age 5, so I don't know. Yeah, 2 different s my one son who's 10 now, my other son who's 8. It was the 8-year-old who gave me the goal.
Wow.
Yeah,
So you're in the hospital. You're finally put your job as sort of the back seat, not answering every ding on your phone. I mean, this is
yeah.
a talk about messy and sort of finding a pretty low point in your life, and to really create this inflection point for yourself in your career. When you think about that and sort of tying it to your book, where does your book tie into this? What do you hope readers can take away from your book?
So, 3 things. I really wanna give my readers hope. You don't have to hit a low point like I did to make changes in your life, to feel less stuck or feel happier. We tend to say, "Oh, I have to wait until I hit rock bottom to make a change." And no, we don't. We don't at all. We can make a change anytime. It's difficult, and we have to choose that option. But I really want my readers to take away hope. I want them to take away inspiration. I share a lot of my personal stories. I share stories I needed to ask my family permission to share because it's stories we don't talk about in my family. I share stories my friends didn't even know. Um, and I also share stories of other really inspiring women who had struggles in their lives and had to overcome them. Some are my clients, some are other women that I was able to interview for the book. But then more than that, I also have a step-by-step guide. So for those of you who do want to break free, who do want to bring more joy into your lives or want to show up more authentically, I give you exercises where you can actually do the work and then reap the reward. So really it's not everyone wants to do the work. They just want to take from the stories. That's okay. You can take what you want from it. But if you do want to break free yourself, I have all of the steps in there and how you can do so.
You ask so many questions there. Some of them I found quite painful, frankly, just because there were questions I never thought about reflecting on, and really got sort of my antenna up and thinking about, you know, yeah, I don't have to, like, do I really have to think my life is sort of nearly over before I make a change? No, you can choose to find a different path, and that's very much what this story is about. And I love this roadmap you've laid out. That's executable, right? We can always talk about breaking free and sort of live in the clouds, if you will, and thinking about perfect and never. And these words you say, I think, to never use, is maybe how you put it in the book. Uh,
Yes.
but you talked about stories you don't share. Can we talk about one of those for a minute? Because there was one in there that really blew my mind. And I think
Mhm.
it was about a brother who was having some trouble around the house.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a story that happened when I was 5, and it took a therapist, actually 5 years ago when I was struggling with my then 5-year-old who had undiagnosed autism and ADHD. It took a therapist for me to connect the dots that, I had a fear of loss in my life, and that stemmed back to when I was 5 years old, my brother who was 12 couldn't live with us any longer. There was a lot of challenges between him and my parents, and it was just not working out. He kept running away. He was putting his life at risk and he was getting in dangerous situations. And it was determined that he had to go live with a foster family. And I come from a small town of 8,000 people. My dad is a lawyer, my mom is a teacher. And, it was just one of these things like, how can that happen to a family like us? And interestingly, we don't really talk about that story, but I asked my parents first, I asked my brother because it's his story, and I asked my parents permission to use that story this year. And I was actually shocked. My dad said yes, because I want people to know that these things can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter. Like these are stories that, we don't talk about, but the more we talk about, maybe the more we'll hear similar stories. I didn't know anyone else growing up whose sibling couldn't live with them.
When I read
Uh,
that, sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
When I read that story in your book, I kept thinking, oh, there's going to be sort of like a happy ending here. And he came back after a couple of months. And no, I mean,
No,
that story really
no.
blew my mind. Of course, he's gone on to
Yeah.
have a pretty successful career in a creative spaces, if I recall
Mhm.
the story correctly, but
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah, and he
imagine.
got on the path, and it was the right path for him. He ended up coming and living with a family in Toronto, actually, going to a special music school here in Toronto, which set him on the path to he's into music and does lots of, creative things with his world, and his work, and that was the right path for him, and now, we're for family gatherings, we're all together and everything, but, yeah, it was a really interesting time in my life that I didn't never had never realized the impact it still was having on me years later. And that's why therapists and coaches exist, because sometimes we need help connecting those dots.
Such an unbelievable story. And I mean, fascinating. Maybe some inspiration for you to break free early on, watching your brother do it at sort of the age early on in his early teen years or tween years, if you will. But that is just one of many examples in Shannon's book of the authentic story she brings that of this messy life that we all live. None of them are perfect. Breaking Free, your guide to creating the career and life of your dreams, is available now and a #1 seller in several categories on Amazon, Shannon. So congratulations on the very fast start to that. Love to see that.
Thank you.
One of the most interesting things I find about books and writing them is many people come to books and they say, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to put it out there. And then what often happens is they get somewhere through it, and myself included, as I wrote my book, you kind of learn something along the way. Shannon, what was a key learning, or what surprised you about your book along the way?
So in a way, too, writing my book was therapy for me. I got to connect those dots, as I was just mentioning. But for me, I remembered how much I dislike feedback. And I worked in the corporate world for 17 years. That's a lot of performance reviews, a lot of mid-year check-ins. And I don't like feedback. And it stems from my first job in banking. I got to work on really exciting projects. I got to fly all over Central and South America and the Caribbean because I spoke Spanish. And I thought I was doing a really great job. And my very first performance review, my boss told me that he was going to give me a C. And I was devastated. I was,
High achiever.
I'm a high achiever, straight A student. I'm okay with like C's in math, maybe, or science. That aren't my strong points. But a C, I was just in shock. I remember I went and called my dad. And my dad goes, well, did you challenge him? Did you ask? No. And I was like, no, because I didn't want to cry. I did not want to cry at work. I thought that was a sign of weakness. And so I didn't challenge it. And it's funny, later on, years later, I realized my boss was actually going by the banking bonus system, and a C wasn't bad. A C was actually decent. But I didn't know that, and I didn't connect the dots. And I also never, I went back and asked him questions, and he was like, you're doing a great job. Like, there was just so much there that I didn't understand, but I also didn't pursue it as much as I should have. But to date, I dread getting feedback because I always assume the worst. But one thing with my book was I hit this point where my editor loved my book. I thought my book was pretty good, but I was like, what if nobody else thinks that? So I went out and I got a group of beta testers who are my target audience, and I had them read my book. And I seriously felt sick to my stomach. I went away. I was actually on a road trip in the States with our best friends during that time. And I was dreading getting the emails in because, I assumed the worst case scenario. I really thought people were going to say, like, this is garbage, don't release this. And which is silly. We do these things, right? We tell ourselves these stories and we tend to go to the worst case scenario. And I see that with my clients all the time. We're like, immediately go from A to Z. And my book was garbage. But I was like, you know what? No, I need to know. And I leaned into the discomfort. I was like, no matter what, my book will be better as a result. And it was, I got some really great constructive feedback, which made my book even better. But the beautiful thing was I actually got a lot of, wow, Shannon, it's like you were in my head. Wow, I can't believe this happened to you too. Oh my gosh, that story is so relatable. And I had this happen to me. So what I ended up getting back were stories. And people, even one person was like, I couldn't put it down. I had to have my husband do all the cooking that weekend. And so I think sometimes too, what can happen is actually getting feedback can boost our confidence. Getting that support can boost, our belief in ourselves, which is sometimes what we need to be able to put ourselves and our work out into the world. And that's what happened with me for this.
So feedback is so powerful in our careers and creating something, right? Getting it to people early on to say, does this thing make sense? But the other theme in here that really is powerful to me, and I think is such a key lesson for all of us, is just because you hear some kind of feedback and you don't like it, don't be afraid to ask a follow-up question. In this case, you sat very angry for many weeks, if not months, if I recall from the book. And meanwhile, you actually got a decent review, but we're sort of equating it to like ABC in school, right?
Yeah.
And we're frustrated about it. I remember vividly in my career, and this guy, I was probably 21, 22, 22, 23 at the time. To me, was like an old guy, right? At the time, and been at it for a while. And he got passed over for promotion, and he came in and moped around the office for probably a month, and soon after was gone, and couldn't get over it. And all he really needed to do was say, well, maybe there's something more I could do here and learn from this experience, and refused to do that, and just chose to take this angry path. So thank you for sharing that. And when we don't have that clarity, that communication, sometimes that can cause sort of this disengagement for people in their jobs, right? What else, or why do you think what is the core cause for disengagement, you think?
Well, and what's really sad right now is I saw a study done by Gallup last year, 2023, so recent, that only 21% of people feel engaged at work right now. And I think part of it is the last 4 years have been, we've had so much change with COVID. COVID has changed the way we work, the way we live. It's changed everything. So getting used to new routines and everything, that's exhausting, which could be why, we don't feel engaged at work, because there's been so much change and we're just trying to survive. But also too, there's lots of job losses happening. The economy is not great. There's a lot of things going on, which leans into our fear to change, right? So, maybe we're scared to ask for that promotion or raise, or to look elsewhere, because, then that job security might not be there. Maybe we'll be let go, or things like that. But the more we can overcome that, the more, we all deserve happiness. We all should feel more engaged at work. We work 90,000 hours in our lifetime. We might as well get some joy out of it. And if I can share, I have one really great client story, actually, where I actually had a man come to me a couple of years ago, and his wife sent him to me. So he had the, free discovery call with me. He was very hesitant. He didn't think he needed a coach. He didn't really know the benefit of working with a coach, but he was in a job where he was no longer happy. And the stress of it was starting to impact his health. And his wife was worried. She was concerned for him. And so he had a call with me. He ended up working with me, and it was so interesting. We had 2 paths. Well, actually, he had 3 paths. He could stay where he was and be miserable and potentially have health consequences. He could switch companies, or we could look at how he could be happier in his current role. And in the end, he didn't have boundaries set up. He didn't have healthy professional habits. So we needed to set up some boundaries. So he did disconnect from work at the end of the day. So he did have him time. So he could work out, those healthy habits. But the beautiful part was too, he was also, he'd worked in this company for 20 years. He really valued the company. He liked what they stood for. He just wasn't happy in his role. So with him, what we did was, there was actually reorganization coming. And so we worked together to create what his ideal role would be. We got rid of the stuff he didn't like. We created this role, and I worked with him on how he could go and ask for it and communicate it to the leadership team in a way that benefits them, but also him. And he sold it to them. And, he got to then have this role that made him happy, staying at a company that he enjoyed, while still having all these healthy habits set up. So he did still have energy, and he didn't burn out, and he could manage his stress. And I just love that story, because it's not always that we have to leave companies or switch jobs. It's sometimes we just have to do the work to bring more energy and joy into our lives.
So this gentleman, first of all, had to come to you because his wife was like, go talk to this coach lady and get yourself straightened out, right? So good start, right? I can only imagine him sort of walking in with this sort of angry and not happy to be there, right? And so talk about a hill to climb for you to kind of start this relationship out, but then really helping him understand where he was, the habits, right? We are what we do, right? And he was living sort of this unpleasant, unhappy life, and you helped him sort of take a more objective view of what was going on. And if I recall the story correctly, the job that he was actually moved into did not exist at the company before, correct?
Did not exist. Nope.
So not only did he find a job that was very fulfilling and interesting to him, but it created immense value for the organization, so much so that they opted to create a new payroll spot for it. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
we just have to, get the courage. I think, there's lots of sayings out there. It takes 2 minutes of courage. That's all we need. 2 minutes of courage to make the ask. And at the end of the day, if they'd said no, that's okay. Then he could have chosen the other path and, left the company and gone somewhere else. But either way, he wasn't happy in his current situation. So anything was better than staying where he was.
As what I like to think of myself as a terminal optimist and a guy who spent many, many years in sales, I always tell people, no is just one step closer to yes. Every no is one step closer to yes, right? So you got to ask for it and have some, some goals and thoughts behind it. And here you completely change the trajectory of this gentleman's circumstance. And what a beautiful outcome. Well done. I love that story. So when you think about, oh, by the way, lots of people chiming in on your stories here, and I want to just recognize that, and also drop Shannon's link in the book here, link in the chat. If you want to order her book, you can order it on the chat. The link I just dropped in the chat, shannontalbot.com/book. But people really appreciating your stories. And Sarah wanted to say hello. She's calling in from her sister's place. Lovely. Elena's on here saying hello. Nafis. Now, Nafis, thank you for sharing this. This is such a great example of something I always say, which is vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And here's Nafis sharing, I'm sure, a pretty tough story in his household as well. Thank you for sharing that. Anand, thank you for joining us today. And yes, I think this is in reference to Shannon's brother's story, where he has had this lovely career in the creative space, which is amazing. So good. We didn't get a name here, but right, someone else giving you a shout out here for really sharing that story. And I'm telling you, Shannon's book is filled with these painful stories. And if you think you've had a bit of a messy run at it, I encourage you to read Shannon's book. It's really unbelievable. And one last note here from Elena, our belief in ourselves to put our work out into the world. And it's not easy to do, right? Someone asked me once, I was on a podcast a little while ago, and the host said to me, what was the hardest thing about writing a book? And I said, I actually hadn't thought about that question for some time. And I said, deciding when it was done. Right. Which is pretty tricky because at some point you have to hit send and then there's no more, right? Pencils down, no more, no more changes. And that could be pretty interesting.
True.
What was that for you? That was there a hard moment for you in the book?
I think the hardest part for me is my book, for anyone who's read it or starting to read it, it's not chronological. So it's not. So it was hard because I took, over a year to write my book, and it was remembering, okay, did I share that story yet? Have I shared it? Do I connect the dots? So those types of things were the hardest part for me. But then I have to say too, for anyone, I know some of you I'm seeing on here, I know you have a dream to write a book as well. And it's the reviewing of it. You will read your book. I think somebody said like 80 times you will read your book. And it was like, okay, I don't want to read my book anymore. I'm so sick of my book. But
does it even make sense anymore? I don't know.
And then as you're reading it, I think it was even the last few versions, my confidence in my book declined. It was hilarious. Like I started feeling, this is pretty good. I'd laugh, I'd cry, it brought out all the emotions. And then towards the end, I was just done with it. But it was actually a pretty fun experience and better than I anticipated.
Right. Better than I anticipated. Lots of fun. Learned so much along the way, and certainly have found a better and I won't say better, but more meaningful way to define success for yourself and so many others. And I want to just share with the audience very quickly. We've got a couple questions left here. Then we're going to jump over to audience questions. So if you have some, please drop those in the chat now, and we'll get those queued up, and we'll jump over to you in a minute. And before we move on to the rapid fire questions, so Shannon, a couple more questions here before we do that. We talked about success early on in your career, this game of life, the board that you valued or built around the board game. What does success look like for you today, or how do you define success today versus those days?
So success for me today, it's really about the broader picture. And it's still a tricky one. I'm going to admit, my default still goes back to money and titles and those achievements. And I really have to rein myself in as a high achiever. It's a difficult one. But for me, it's, getting to spend that extra time with my kids and my husband. It's the balance. It's the doing what I love. It's standing on stages and speaking. I love that. It's seeing the transformation that happens with my coaching clients and having time to write, because writing is a big passion of mine. But it's just remembering it's not just about work. And it's interesting. I'll see that with a lot of my clients too. I always ask my clients at the start of every session, what's a win you've had this week? And we default to work. And so it's also thinking, okay, no, but personally too, like, tell me what's great in your personal life. But I have one other interesting client story that I think I also share this in my book. But one of my clients that I was working with, she was coming back from her second mat leave, and she works in a male-dominated industry. And she was really nervous coming back that, she now has 2 kids, and she wanted to make sure she still got home for dinner and bath time and things like that was important to her. But she also, there's the perception if she left work at 4:30 to catch her train, and what would that look like? And so anyway, we worked together on the balance and everything. And I'll never forget, I asked her, I said, okay, what does success look like for you in the next 6 months? And she listed off, and I wrote it down. And then I said to her, can I read this back to you? And she said, yes. And the first thing I said was, okay, success is knowing everyone and everything about your industry, in and about your industry. And as soon as I said it out loud, she went, well, that's ridiculous. Like, yeah, it is ridiculous. She had set the bar so high. It was like, it wasn't going to be achievable. So it was, it's sometimes we need another person too, to put us in check of what a realistic definition of success is. And the last thing I'll just say on this too is I also now really try and stick with what is in my control, because so much is outside of our control. And if we include those things in our goals and in our definitions of success, we may be setting ourselves up for disappointment because we can't control them.
So key. I mean, how great to have that sounding board in you as her coach to say, do you realize what you just said out loud? And this is completely unattainable, which is only going to leave you frustrated for months and months, if not years to come. So great work for you to really helping them kind of reframe that. That's what coaches do, right? To help us really kind of reframe our thinking on so many things. And many times eradicate words like, every and never and all, right? Because sometimes we use those and it's just not realistic.
Yeah.
When you think about the book here, and by the way, please keep dropping your comments and questions in the chat. We're going to jump over to the audience questions here in just a moment and tell you about a really awesome offer Shannon has coming up here. But Shannon, thinking about breaking free, what are your goals for the book here in 2024 and beyond?
Okay. So again, I always, I have this tendency to set unrealistic goals outside of my control, being a hyperachiever. So this time I was like, my main goal was publishing and releasing and marketing my book. So that was really, it was just being able to say, hey, a dream I had since I was 10 came true. So that's really what I focused on. But of course, I want book sales, and I want to grow my speaking business over the next few years. And I do have this one kind of fun goal that, I really want to speak, and I don't know where it came from, but I really want to speak on a stage in California, to perhaps Silicon Valley type risk takers about how to go after, more of what they want. And, it's okay to fail and get back up and just bring more passion and purpose into our lives.
Silicon Valley. Where's my Stanford friends, everybody? Come on. Where are my Stanford friends? Reach out to Shannon. See if you can help her out here. But I love that. And I really appreciate this inspiration you take from, these extraordinary risk takers that seem to gravitate towards that part of the world and want to, try to make the world interesting and a better place. And another thing you're doing in the next couple of weeks are these workshops you have lined up, right? And can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So not next week, but the week after, I have 3 different time slots for the Pursuit of Career Happiness workshop. So they're free, they're 90 minutes, and they're really a time for you to come and figure out, okay, it's almost like we're going to do an audit of your career in a fun way, though, because audit doesn't sound fun, especially in the banking world. But we're going to do a fun audit of your career. And then we're also going to give you some action steps, some simple and tangible action steps of how you can improve some of those areas in your career so that, you can also break free and chase your happy in your career.
Chase, you're happy. And so 3 workshops coming up, 9 minutes long. You can see the dates here, January 29th, 31st, and February 2nd. I just dropped a link in the chat here, which is Shannon's calendar, if you want to connect with her and learn a little bit more about that. Shannon, what is sort of briefly, what does a career audit look like?
Career audit
are you a CPA?
No. No, my husband laughs. He's like, having your MBA doesn't make you really good in math, does it? Which, no, I'm not good in math. No, not at all. But no, career audit, it's really looking at, so, So often we look at the big things, we look at title, we look at salary and things like that. But what this is, it's going into it deeper and looking at various aspects of your career that you may not always think about, and you may not have really looked at, okay, how does your current career line up with what you're looking for or what your values are and things like that. So it's doing a deeper dive into the various areas that make up our career.
Finding that alignment with what our career is about and what we like to do. I mean, so often we sort of never find or take the time to do that. So what a great offer to put out there to the universe. As I said, Shannon, grab Shannon's link in the chat there to sign up for that. And now we want to open it up to some audience questions and see what's on people's minds out there. I do see a bit of I'll call it a bit of a comment question here, but I think it's one interesting to look at from Aswati. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Thanks for sharing your stories, especially on feedback and leaning into discomfort. Discomfort is a term we hear a lot, particularly when you talk about what you're talking about, which is breaking free and creating change. What would you say to somebody, Shannon, thinking about, gosh, how do I start to lean into that discomfort? Because discomfort sounds uncomfortable.
The best way I can describe it is, have any of you ever done a renovation? And it can be a small one, it could be a big one, but I like to think of it as a renovation. Okay. So, and even watching those, even if you've never done a renovation, think of those TV shows, right? It starts with a beautiful picture. This is what your end state's going to look like, your new house, your kitchen, your closet. It starts with a vision. Then you get into doing the work. And you know what? Oh, maybe you have a wall that can't be moved. Maybe that material is out of stock, or it's going to cost thousands of dollars more, and things get messy. So we have this beautiful vision, we get into doing the work, and things get messy. You might start questioning, why did I ever do this? Why did I start? What's going on? Maybe I should give up. The beautiful thing about a reno is you normally can't give up. Unfortunately, the same doesn't apply in our lives. But you know that the end product's going to be worth it. It may not be the exact same as the vision, but it's going to be worth it. And if you can get through the messy, if you can stick it out, that is when the transformation can happen. And it doesn't feel good. And I tell my clients, we usually feel like we're going backwards before we go forward, because you have this greater self-awareness, things are coming up you didn't know before, and it feels so icky. But that is when we grow. And we don't, that's how we explore and do things that we maybe haven't done before, is those come from a place of discomfort. And so it's like, lean into the discomfort and know it's worth it.
Wow. Discomfort is, I heard once Noah Kagan, who's one of the early employees at Facebook, who actually got let go just before his stock options vested, wrote a book about it. Now he's gone on to do much bigger things, but I heard him talk a while ago, and he said, let discomfort be your compass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you feel that discomfort, follow that and see where you land. Because as you said, when you lean into that discomfort, that's where we can learn and grow. And getting out of our comfort zone is where really positive change can happen. So I couldn't agree more. And I love that. We have another question here from Dave McCurdy. Congrats on achieving your dream of writing the book. When you think back on realizing that dream, what are you most proud of?
Hi, David. I am most proud of, so for a long time, I've struggled with, what are people going to think of me? Or are they going to judge me? And, will I not get clients if I share this story? Or will that organization not want me to come and speak? That dictated my life for a very long time. And I have to say, honestly, with this book, I didn't care anymore. I was like, my stories will help who they help. If they piss people off, they piss people off. But, I don't name names or do anything there to make, throw anyone under the bus. But I didn't hold myself back from sharing the stories in my book, especially the one of my brother, and other stories that, there's a bit of shame that comes with them. There's embarrassment, things like that. But I was like, you know what? If it can help somebody, then that's what I want. It's not about how I am perceived. It's more, okay, if I can help somebody, then I want to do it.
Right. And I think at some point you said this book was a book you had written or heard or been found some time ago, right? Did I hear that from you at some point, or maybe that was in your book?
Well, it was a book I wish someone had written for me.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Sorry, yeah.
Didn't say that
I
very
learned
clearly.
from stories. And, there's a lot of how-to books out there and things like that, which are great. But for me, it's I learn from stories. I want to hear stories from people. And one of the stories I include in my book is, this amazing CEO that I heard speak years ago at my university. And she let me include her story in my book. And it was the first time I'd ever heard another professional woman say how hard it was to be a parent and an ambitious career person. And she went on to do even greater things with her career, but by aligning her values and picking the right company and things like that. So, I wrote the book that I wished I'd had early on in my career to help me navigate some of these things, because for so long, I thought ambitious was a bad thing. Oh, I'm a mom. I can't be ambitious. I can't travel for work. I can't do all these things. That makes me a bad person or a bad parent. But it's not true. And so, the more we can read these stories and share the experiences of struggling and of overcoming things, I think just the better off we can all be.
This was the book I wish somebody wrote for me many years ago. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Lots of great comments coming in the chat here. Thank you, Sarah. Love embracing discomfort analogy. One has to be uncomfortable first to be comfortable. Couldn't agree with you more there. We didn't get a name on that one. Elena chimed in here. It's such a lovely, timely topic because career well-being based on Gallup and obviously reflection is the foundation for total well-being. I once heard somebody say, Elena, all companies are healthcare companies. And I think what you shared there is sort of tied to that, right? How you feel and how you're treated at work in that environment can have an impact on you in so many different ways. One more question here from John Thompson, who's going to be on the show in a few weeks. And it's around this idea of engagement. How can individuals take initiative inside of a company if they're feeling disengaged to enhance their own engagement work, and what role do leaders play in creating that environment or reversing this disengagement trend, do you think?
I think one of the things that, making more time for creativity. I think blocking off time in our calendars, whether you're going to be creative on your own and brainstorm things on your own, or just find a way for you to bring more creativity in your lives. I think too, we've kind of moved away from creativity and giving us that time, and we're prioritizing our schedules and trying to fit things in. And sometimes the first thing to go are these other things that maybe aren't what we're recognized for at work. So making more time for creativity. And I think too, speaking up more. And I get it. I know it's uncomfortable to speak up. People are afraid they're going to lose their jobs. People are afraid they might not get their bonus, but we have to do it. You have to speak up, and you have to, ask for what you want and make the case for it. And, maybe there are activities or things we can bring more into the workplace, especially now if we're in this more virtual/hybrid role. People are feeling lonely more than ever. Maybe there's, some other new ways of interacting that people just need to have the courage to bring up and propose that they do. But I think, building those relationships, connecting, having more time for creativity, and then as well, just making sure we're making time for ourselves and our well-being as well, which will help us feel better emotionally and physically.
I really like this idea around relationship building around the company. We can learn from those people, figure out new paths to maybe consider. And also this idea of carving out creativity, because when we give ourselves permission to be creative, right, we can start to sort of see new dots existing out there in the world. And when we can sort of see a bunch of new dots, it helps us connect other dots and where we can create potential value. So I really appreciate that message. Such a beautiful message, and so many great notes popping in here in the chat. Thank you for all those. But Shannon, we are going to dive over to the my favorite part of the show, the rapid fire questions. And I first want to drop your LinkedIn profile in here for those that want to connect with Shannon. Highly recommended. There's her LinkedIn profile, so please connect with her on there. And are you ready to dive into the rapid fire questions here?
I'm ready. And sorry, I'll just tell everyone too, I'm just coming off a cold, so I apologize, but
hang in there.
cold
Hang in
season
there.
here. Yeah, I'm all set.
Favorite thing to cook, Shannon?
Anything my husband is cooking, because I actually don't like to cook.
Is there a mic drop here? I feel like there's a mic drop. First concert you went to, karaoke superstar?
The Tragically Hip.
Tragically
in the US. They're a Canadian band. Unfortunately, lead singer has since passed away, but they're a big rock Canadian band from Kingston, Ontario.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I love it. What about the last photo on your phone?
Let me see. My 10-year-old son washing the dishes last night, and I took it to post on my stories to say I was trying to have patience and not micromanage how we wash the dishes. it's
Well
really
done.
hard for me to let that go.
But it sounds like maybe there was some success there.
He
I love
watches
it.
them.
Mine is my completely snow covered front yard from this morning. Favorite song to sing with or without an audience? And Shannon, by the way, just recently sang a karaoke, Jesse's Girl, as I recall.
Jesse's Girl.
Is that
Yeah,
the favorite
that's
song?
my
Or is there a better?
karaoke song. Yes, I was at a wedding at a rock concert venue here in Toronto, El Macombo, last weekend, and they had a live band, and I got to sing Jesse's Girl up on stage, and it was amazing. And I
So
have the
cool.
video on my Instagram. I'm not a great singer, but I just love it. So it's fun.
Amazing. Scariest animal, Shannon.
It was bears, but then I went to Yellowstone with my oldest last year, and we there when the moms had just had their cubs, and we were 100 yards away from grizzlies and black bears, and my fear went away. They're
Whoa.
beautiful. They're very beautiful, although I still stay the 100 yards away. I had my bear spray, but yeah, used to be bears. Maybe it's
Wow.
crocodiles because I'm going to the Everglades next, or alligators. That's probably my new one.
I love it. You talked about the Silicon Valley dream. Any further audacious goals for the book? What are you thinking about?
I would love to do a TEDx talk one day. That's on my big list of hairy audacious goals.
Love it. TEDx talk, Shannon Talbot. I can't wait to hear it. Breaking free. As you wrote the book, favorite writing location?
So a lot of my writing took place at my son's soccer games, in the car, doing all the carpooling. But I did do one writing getaway last year to Niagara-on-the-Lake. So just a really small town outside Niagara Falls, Ontario. And it was beautiful in a nautical inn, really small and quaint and lovely. And it was in winter and just really warm and comforting.
Being a northern person and loving the snow, I really appreciate that story. Thank you. Most memorable moment as you went through the book journey?
Well, I did have one moment where I did jump up and down and scream, and it was like 7:30 in the morning, and my family thought I was going crazy, and that was when, I sent out my book to some people to read, and Seth Godin read my book cover to cover, who's a well-known author and entrepreneur, and he actually wrote me back that I did a great job, and then gave me a beautiful quote for my book, and that was probably my most memorable standout moment.
Seth Godin, serial author and entrepreneur, shared on Shannon's book this quote, which I think I would have been jumping up and down too. Thank you, Seth. Dreams turn into hope when we bring useful action to the work. Shannon's Talbot book is a powerful step on that journey. Seth Godin. Wow. Well done. And good for you for going out and asking for it, right? If you
Yeah, keep
never
getting
asked.
asked. I've had a few people
Right.
go, "How did you get Seth Godin to give you a quote?" And literally I say, "I asked."
Right? Sometimes we got to be a little bit audacious and get out of our comfort zone, right?
Mhm.
2 more questions here, Shannon. Describe your writing journey in 5 words.
Oh. Vulnerable. Repetitive.
80 times.
Courageous. Consistency, just writing a lot every day. And what was another one? Fun. It was fun.
What a beautiful message, and what a journey you've been on, and sharing all of this messy and this whole idea of chasing your happy. I love it. Closing thoughts for our listeners here, Shannon.
So I would say so often we focus on what could go wrong, right? What are those worst case scenarios? Our brains are designed to keep us safe. And that's great for a reason, but it also holds us back. And so instead, the next time, let's say something feels uncomfortable or you're up against a fear or a negative belief or something, I would say instead ask yourself, what's the best case that could happen in this scenario? And go for it.
So often, right? We say, oh my God, this could go wrong. This could break. This could make me look stupid. All of these things, right? What if we said, what could go right? What an amazing message. Shannon, thank you for letting us know that we can chase our own happy. We can choose to pick a different path. And there's always time to find that better path. I so appreciate you sharing that story with me and the listeners of Meet the Author Live.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's a lot
Thank
of fun.
you. And for our listeners out there, if you're feeling a little bit stuck, feeling like things are a little bit messy, and looking across your network of friends and colleagues, see if you know someone out there who's feeling a bit stuck and feeling a bit messy and maybe getting close to that rock bottom, but doesn't need to hit it just yet, go out and get a copy of Shannon's book. Right now, she's got it on the ebook available for half off for the next week. So go out and get 5 copies and share it with friends and colleagues that need to hear this story to help them find that inflection point and begin to chase their happy. And if you have time in the coming weeks, definitely sign up for one of Shannon's workshops on the 29th, 31st, or 2nd. As I said, I dropped the links in the chat to find out information for those to get signed up for those. So thanks again, Shannon. Thanks to our listeners for joining this episode of Meet the Author Live. Definitely check out Shannon's book, Breaking Free, Stop Holding Back, Start Being You, your guide to creating the career and life of your dreams at shannontalbot.com/book. And connect with her on LinkedIn, which I dropped in the chat as well. And as I said, go ahead and take advantage of this great price Shannon's put on her ebook for the next couple of weeks. Connect with me at JCS Optimizer on LinkedIn and Instagram, and to stay up to date on the live schedule. Thanks again for joining us, everybody. I'm your host, John Saunders. Keep moving forward.